Welcome back to Murder on Record, where every case is etched in blood and the truth is buried in the fine print.
Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we dig through those dusty files, the overlooked evidence, and, the whispered testimonies.
We try to bring long-forgotten crimes back into the light.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're diving deep into, a truly tragic and intriguing murder mystery out of Arizona.
Yeah, this is the case of Marissa Devault and the death of her husband, Dale Harrell.
It's a case that just keeps you thinking, doesn't it?
It really does, because
Mhm.
you have this incredibly brutal act, right? A wife attacking her sleeping husband with a claw hammer.
Horrific, January 2009.
Exactly. But then you start peeling back the layers, and you find potential financial motives, really serious allegations of abuse.
Right.
It gets complicated fast.
Absolutely. It's not just straightforward. There's this whole web, like you said. Financial desperation seems to be a factor.
Good time.
Claims of abuse, affairs, and then this really unsettling detail about a third party being framed initially.
Right, that adds another layer of, wait, what's going on here?
So the key players we need to keep in mind are Marissa Devault, the wife, significant debts, alleged affairs,
Dale Harrell, the husband, the victim.
Alan Flores Devault's lover, apparently, and also someone she owed money to. A lot of money.
Yes. And Stanley Cook. He's the friend, the one with brain damage, who somehow got implicated right at the start. Bizarre.
So bizarre. Our aim today really is to explore those open questions, the uncertainties that still kind of hang over this case.
Definitely. And I think the best way to start is just mapping out the key events. The timeline itself tells quite a story.
Okay, let's unpack that. You mentioned a key date early on.
Yeah, January 1st, 2009. Ringing in the new year.
How?
Well, that's the day Marissa Devault took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Dale Harrell.
$500,000. Wow.
Well, considering what happened just 2 weeks later.
Yeah, that timing is stark. Investigators must have zeroed in on that.
Oh, absolutely. In any case like this, you see a big insurance policy taken out right before a death. That's going to be front and center, a potential major red flag.
You can't ignore it.
Wow.
Okay, so that's January 1st, then January 14th.
That's the night of the attack. Dale Harrell is attacked in his sleep. Viciously. With a claw hammer.
And Devault's initial story, what did she tell the police right away?
Her immediate claim was that she'd been sexually assaulted by him. That was the narrative, the reason, she said, for the violence.
So based on that, she wasn't immediately charged with murder.
No, initially it was aggravated assault. And maybe somewhat surprisingly, given how brutal the attack was, she was actually released on bail later that same month, January 2009.
Released on bail after attacking her husband with a hammer.
It does seem jarring, doesn't it? But that initial claim of sexual assault likely played a role in that decision. It adds a strange twist to the early investigation.
But then, tragically, Dale Harrell's condition worsened.
Yes. He clung to life for a few weeks, but he died from his injuries on February 9th, 2009.
Which, of course, changed everything legally.
Instantly. The charges against Devault were upgraded. Now it was first-degree murder. The stakes became incredibly high.
And the legal system moved pretty quickly after his death.
It seems so. Just a couple of weeks later, February 27th, 2009, a grand jury indicted her for premeditated first-degree murder.
So, for listeners, a grand jury indictment means a group of citizens looked at the prosecution's evidence.
Right, and they decided there was enough probable cause, enough evidence to formally charge her with planning the killing. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing in their view.
Okay, but then there's this big jump. He dies in early 2009, the indictment is soon after, but the trial doesn't start until 2014. 5 years. Why such a long delay?
Well, these complex cases, they often take time. You've got extensive investigations, forensic analysis like blood spatter, maybe DNA.
Gathering all that evidence.
Exactly. And then there are pretrial motions, legal arguments back and forth. The prosecution needed to build a solid case for premeditation. That's key for first-degree murder.
And the defense.
They were likely preparing their counter-narrative, focusing on that alleged history of abuse, maybe trying to build a self-defense or battered woman syndrome type of argument.
So, lots of legal maneuvering.
Almost certainly. 5 years to just a very thorough and probably quite contentious lead up to the actual trial.
Right. So let's get into that evidence, the theories presented at trial. The police initially might have considered an intruder given her claim.
Possibly, very briefly. But investigators are trained to look for inconsistencies. If her story about a sexual assault didn't quite match the physical scene.
Like the way the attack happened.
Yeah, or if her statements changed or just didn't hold up under scrutiny, the focus would naturally shift very quickly to her. Inconsistencies are often what breaks a case open.
And the prosecution's main argument, it seems, was money.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Financial motive. They hammered home the debt she owed to Alan Flores, her lover,
Okay.
and that $500,000 life insurance policy.
Why is financial motive often so powerful for a jury?
Because it provides a clear, understandable, almost logical in a terribly cold way, reason for murder. Desperate for money. Husband is insured. It offers a narrative for why someone would plan such an act.
Escape the debt, gain a windfall.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with that policy taken out just days before the attack. The timing makes the financial motive seem very plausible, suggesting it wasn't just about escaping abuse, but potentially about profiting from his death.
It's hard evidence of a potential benefit to her. And what about the physical evidence? You mentioned blood spatter.
Right. Blood spatter analysis can be incredibly revealing. It can show where people were positioned, the weapon used, the force.
Kind of reconstruct the crime scene.
Exactly. If the analysis showed blood patterns consistent with Devault standing over a sleeping or lying Harold and striking downwards repeatedly.
As opposed to a struggle.
Right. As opposed to patterns you might see in a mutual fight or a self-defense scenario. That kind of evidence would directly contradict a self-defense claim and place her as the aggressor, the one wielding the hammer. Very damaging.
So that points towards her narrative not matching the physics of the event.
Potentially, yes. It puts the weapon firmly in her hand during the fatal attack.
Okay, but the defense had its own narrative, this history of alleged abuse. How do defense teams usually build that kind of case?
Well, they'd try to paint a picture of Marissa Devault as a long-suffering victim. They might bring in witnesses, maybe therapists, perhaps evidence of past incidents, if any existed and was documented.
Trying to establish a pattern?
Yes. Arguing her actions, even though fatal, were a desperate, maybe even inevitable response to ongoing abuse, maybe culminating in that alleged sexual assault she claimed happened right before the attack.
To convince the jury it was self-defense. Or something closer to it.
Essentially, yes. To argue she wasn't acting out of greed, but out of fear or desperation. The goal is to create reasonable doubt about the premeditation element, or even justify the act itself.
But
Proving a long history of abuse, especially if it wasn't well documented or consistently reported, can be really challenging in court. Corroboration is key.
so the jury is left weighing these two starkly different motives. Greed versus desperation.
Exactly, a very difficult decision. But the sources we looked at also flagged some, let's say, unresolved elements, things that still feel a bit murky.
Like the abuse itself.
Yeah. While the defense argued abuse, the actual extent, the severity, the immediacy of the threat, it's described as somewhat unclear based on the public information.
Meaning there wasn't overwhelming proof presented. Or it wasn't detailed.
It seems the full picture might have been ambiguous. Did it rise to the level that would make a jury believe she had to resort to that level of violence and self-defense? That ambiguity is something jurors would have wrestled with.
Okay. And then there's the other big unresolved piece. Stanley Cook.
Ah, yes. Stanley Cook, the friend who was initially framed, that's just deeply troubling.
And the sources say his role remains unsatisfactorily explained. What could that mean?
It raises so many questions. Was Devault acting entirely alone in the framing? Did she manipulate Cook, maybe taking advantage of his brain damage?
Or did Cook know something? Or was he involved somehow?
Exactly. Is he involved even peripherally? Did he witness something? Why him? The fact that this whole aspect, framing a vulnerable person, wasn't fully clarified at trial, leaves this significant loose end. It makes you wonder if the whole story really came out.
It definitely casts a shadow, doesn't it? Even if you accept the jury's verdict on Devault's guilt for the murder itself.
Right.
The fact that she apparently tried to pin it on someone else, especially someone vulnerable, and we don't know the full story there, it's disturbing. It makes you question things.
It does. It makes you wonder about the initial stages of the investigation, perhaps. Were all avenues truly exhausted regarding Cook's apparent involvement or how he came to be framed?
Yeah, it adds a layer of complexity that, as you said, goes beyond just wife kills husband for insurance money.
Precisely. The conviction rests heavily on that financial motive and the forensic evidence like the blood spatter. Strong evidence, certainly.
Leading to the guilty verdict for first-degree premeditated murder in 2014.
Yes. But those lingering questions about the true nature of the abuse, and especially about Stanley Cook's role and the framing they just hang there, it suggests maybe we don't have all the pieces.
Yeah. So we're left with this central conflict. Strong evidence pointing one way, towards financial gain and a planned act.
Mm-hmm.
but nagging questions about abuse and this whole unexplained business with Stanley Cook that complicate the picture.
It's a case where the legal system reached a conclusion guilty.
Hmm.
But the full human story, the complete why and how involving everyone, it feels like there might still be gaps. Ambiguities remain.
A stark reminder that a verdict doesn't always mean every single question is answered.
Indeed, it leaves you pondering the full truth behind such a tragedy.
A really complex case that definitely makes you think.
It does.
Until next time, stay curious and keep your eyes on the evidence.